Warning, listening to the PM-Pro Show may cause sudden clarity in leadership and project management, plus side effects like higher pay, smoother transitions, better teamwork, and dangerously efficient results. I'm Tim Dalhouse, retired U.S. Marine and founder of PM-ProLearn, where we bridge the gap between the battlefield and the boardroom. Each episode delivers battle-tested strategies for success to help you lead, transition, and train like a pro. Welcome to the PM-Pro Show. Gear up with us to suck less and win more.
You know, when you're putting down $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 just for sometimes just a semester, let alone a year, it's like, hey, this investment, do we really know where we're putting it at, like from the ground up, how much it was just put on like to start it and then figure it out versus like, do you know what you're getting committed to?
But is it really all that different from a military transition, right? Let's run the parallel of going to college without a direction or a plan. And then we go to the military transition without a direction or a plan. And I think college is almost going to become the default fallback plan of military transition. Why? Because all just get paid to go sit in a classroom and learn something. Okay, but was there a end goal trajectory that you were looking for employment in that transformation, right? Were you using this as a professional upskilling resource to get you to a goal, or was it just a means to survive while you were trying to discover who you really were? Right. And I think there's a lot of truth for not only the high schooler going to college, but also for the veteran, that we are not preparing kids well enough to think and lead on their own independent of the family system, just like we are not preparing our veterans well enough to think and act on their own outside of the military family system. Going back to the AUSA conversation, a lot of what they're talking about now for the future fight is how do we create agility and thought leadership and war fighting and readiness. And it's like, that starts between the ears. Like we've got to get back to foundational learning of the basics, right? I heard Sergeant Major Weimer facilitated a workshop about training with all the CSMs that were there, right? All the command sergeant majors in the room about professional development. So we can do all these cool training toys. We can get all the technology and drone strikes. We need to teach people how to pull out the ammo from the ammo shed quickly and get it distributed. We need people to know how to do maintenance on the truck. We need to make sure that we are excellent in the basics first. Then we can add on these advanced topics and advanced things. But we've got to get training focused back on like the foundational warfighting skills.
That makes me think of, going through high school and not knowing how to balance a budget, or not knowing like the understanding of, hey, when you start making money, which will be either while you're in high school or right after you graduate, like what are taxes? There are some of the basic things, which is, taxes may be seen as difficult, but some basic life skills that definitely are not pushed onto the student for them to like grasp early. It seems more like right now that in terms of, what I've heard, what I've seen and what I've experienced in terms of high school, it's get ready for college. And then from there, you'll figure out your career when that might not even be the main standard for most people.
I concur. And back to that same concept, how much do we spend teaching our young enlisted and young officers about finance and management?
That's true.
I was in
get this government travel credit card real quick.
Yeah. And don't screw it up and don't use it for the wrong things. So I was actually, teaching a group of Marines, my empowered transition class. And it was funny. There was a sergeant major in there with 30 years. He's like coming to the end of his, authorized time of service. I was like, yeah, I heard about a sergeant major who's never like turned the water on in a house. And he's like, wait, yeah, that's me. I've never not lived in base housing. Like he's been in for 30 years and never not lived in base housing. I've never had property ever.
Yeah.
And they're like, like this has to be a lie. He's like, no, I've always lived on base housing. And it threw his like top secret security clearance like into a loop. He pushed people to get a bachelor's degree in criminal justice because it's the fastest degree to get. And I just want to get it so I can promote. I'm not getting it to learn anything. I'm not getting it because I actually care about anything. I'm getting it because I'm just supposed to get a degree.
He's like, wait, that was
right. That
like,
was
I'm
me
supposed
too.
To have this next step.
Yeah. He's like, how's infantry? Like, he's like, did you like get my bio before this presentation? And I was like, no, I'm just talking about the common conversations that we keep having, which is forcing money into a degree program with no goal, right? Mm-hmm. The goal is simply to be promotable in the military. So I get a degree in criminal justice. I get a master's degree in strategic international studies or whatever I got going to a military school without any thought of what happens when I leave, what happens next, And I think we're failing because we're letting the family system determine behavior without ever really educating on independence, without educating.
I was about to say, is it more of like trying
freedom
to empower the student, right? To either have more choices or even understand what those choices are? Is it more like student empowerment is what I'm hearing?
So the goal of the empowered transition class is to put control back in the hands of our veterans so that as they think about transition or they're going through transition, they're the ones driving their future, not allowing the system to drive their future, right? And while in uniform, the system drives everything, right?
Yeah.
If you want to stay in mom and dad's house, you're going to follow mom and dad's rules. And if you want to grow and get a higher allowance check in mom and dad's family, you're going to do what mom and dad tell you to do. Right. So, I mean, there's this very structured, very extrinsic driven pathway that to be successful, you really just have to comply, behave, and follow. And if you do these things, theoretically, you will stay in the military and promote and grow.
So we're trying to provide the more systemic options, right? It's not just this one pathway, it's several others.
Right.
So that way, when they're still following, the order and structure, they can at least say, okay, I have some more say in the matter.
Correct. Or how to think, is this the right path that I want? Understanding who they are as an individual, building their own independent individual goals, and then finding a way to set their own path to success. And that choice might be stay in the military. That choice might be I need to leave, right? I mean, just whatever that is, teaching them how to think for themselves, create their own pathway, their own management plan. There's only 3 tools for veterans to bridge what I call the credibility gap, right? It's not a capability gap. Veterans are more capable than any other workforce member in the world, in my opinion. They will do more, think more, behave better, more disciplined, show up. I mean, there's so many soft skill and hard skill characteristics that veterans bring to the table, but they don't speak the right language. They don't look like what a professional should look like. So I say it's a credibility gap more than a capability gap, right? So there's only 3 tools that
I was about to ask you for those 3 tools. Yeah.
Yeah. There's only 3 you can use to fill in the credibility gap. You have college, you have certifications, and you have internships. Those are the 3 tools that you can use to fill in the credibility gap. College, long lead time. Often we pursue it without a future goal. So is the college I have or the college I'm pursuing actually aligned to a future profession or vocation? Usually not. Second, right? Certifications, where we come in, right? Fast to get, easy to get, very impactful now in terms of the job market. Because the difference between college and a certification is a college is current as of today. If I am still a currently certified professional, that shows the employer that I have the skills and behaviors now, not something I learned 20 years ago, right? So again, college is a great foundation in certain things. If you want to go into STEM, medicine, even accounting and finance, there's very critical skills you must get through a college program. But if I want to be seen as competent in a technical area or even in managerial roles like project management, a certification is more impactful because it maintains its currency, right? It's not latent. It doesn't have an expiration if it's maintained and it's current. The third thing that is an internship, skill bridge, right? Towards the end of my career, if I want to bridge into a profession or a vocation or a company that doesn't understand what veterans are, become an intern with them, show them, arrive on site, learn from them, get that on the job training, understand how they operate, right? Now, the biggest gap in skill bridge or in an internship is that every company is unique, right? I think we view corporate America as the military where like, if I want to go into the army or defense, I got to pick any defense company. And once I go learn how they operate, they all work the same way. No, they don't. Right. Now, there's some similarities in defense contractors, but I mean, terminology and structure. And I know Ed Watson, one of our guests on a previous podcast, he's worked at Salesforce and now he worked at Amazon. Now he works at Salesforce. And he's like, they're radically different cultures, radically different processes. He's doing almost the exact same job in 2 different major tech firms doing cloud AI. Could be like, on the outside structure, they look almost identical in terms of what they do, but how they work and what they do inside is totally different. So doing an internship on the job is great, but that doesn't mean it's a blanket understanding of all professions. Whereas in the military, if I go become a logistician in the Army or logistician in the Marine Corps or logistician in the Air Force, it's probably a fairly good commonality of what that means and what that does. But in industry, it's not. So I think internships are fantastic. Internships are a great way to get exposure into fields and things that we don't know. It's a great way to get your foot in the door. But I think it's truly not understood is what does that really do for me?
I want to ask you about DoD Skills Bridge. That can sometimes be difficult because that person who is on that Skills Bridge program still technically on the books, so to speak, of the unit, but they're doing internships at another location. Is there a way or like to make it, I guess, easier on the unit to sort of say, yes, let's go, let this person go do the internship? Because I know that can always be a conflict of interest.
The answer is no, actually. And they're making it harder to use because it was so successful. They've now shortened it because of readiness levels and other things. Right. But each service had their own rules as far as who was allowed to go, where the approvals come from, how high the approval has to go.
And now people loved it.
Yeah. Now they've created a rank durational limit where like junior NCOs can get up to a certain amount of time, like mid NCOs versus senior NCOs. Same with officers, like junior officers versus mid officers versus senior officers. So they've really restricted that conversation and the allowance of who can take it and how long they can take it. I think my issue with it is not that it's not a great program. I think it's a phenomenal program, but I still think that the gap is figuring out who you are and what direction you want to go. I think veterans think SkillBridge is a I'm going to get hired program. It is not a I'm going to get hired program. It is meant to be a I'm going to learn something from this company program. Because veterans think if I go to a SkillBridge, I'm going to get a job.
Everyone's saying, okay, how do I secure my future as quickly as possible, right? And sometimes it'll be taking like the first job that offers you a letter, so that way you know you have like a cushion, right? And so I could see the same thing with SkillsBridge, which is how do I get good with this company so that they want to hire me as soon as possible? When it's the mindset is definitely trying to more like quickly protect yourself rather than develop yourself for whatever the future may hold.
Yep. And I think that's part of the empowered transition conversation I have is figuring out who you are, what are your requirements, and am I even going the right direction? You know, and that takes time. That takes a lot of time to figure out your skills, your passions, your personality, you know, the trades you bring to a company, and then say, is this a good relationship? Right. So to the joke, I use dating a lot. It's like, oh, that girl wants me. I'll date her. You're like, what do you know about her? I don't know. She wants me. I'm going to go on a date and I'm going to hook myself to a long-term relationship because I just need a relationship. It does, but man, you're just a rebound, right? I mean, so let's go back to that dating and like, how many rebound jobs did you get because you just needed employment and you said, I'll date anybody, right? I mean, so let's take the veteran phrase that says, I'll do anything, anywhere. I'll date anyone from any place. Like you have standards, but what are those standards? Have you defined those standards? I mean, we do in our relationships to some degree, either through bad learning or prior thought and say, no, that wasn't a good fit. Like that's not my standard. Like I have these moral standards. I have these performance standards. I have these interactive standards. I have these verbal standards. The biggest gap I see for veterans, like, have you ever thought about a job in the same way? Have you ever described your standards for the performance and interactions of a company? How do they treat you? How do they talk to you? How much do you get paid? How do you feel when you're around that family team? Is it respectful? Is it disrespectful? Do I have authority? Do I have freedom to think? You know,
I was about to say, that sounds a little bit like a fear-based thing. The reason why they don't do that, it's like, because there is fear in even asking those questions, even in a relationship, I don't want this person to think differently of me because I have a standard that they are not willing to accept. Because you want to protect that relationship so much, that fear can definitely take over what you would have done autonomously.
I think that fear is also driven by ignorance because in the military, we are taught what those standards are. And those standards continue to pervade through the culture of the family, right? And we carry, I think, an ignorance forward when we leave that says this exists in all professional organizations. You want me to run. You want me to think. You want me to interact like this. There is rank. When the boss says I want to talk, I expect it to be on time and show up and I'll stand at attention. I mean, we, I think, project and carry a lot of our cultural standards forward into industry without really understanding that we have to know our own expected standards and make sure that those exist before we jump into that relationship. I have not created any desire to want to fix it at the individual or the organizational level. And I'm getting any knowledge and skills-based training to make sure that you have the ability, step 4 in change, and we're not reinforcing it at all, right? In fact, we're reinforcing the opposite in many ways, right? That says, don't get a cert, just network. You know, you don't need a cert, just network.
Some people think, okay, network, let me just, start a LinkedIn account or let me just start posting. What is networking?
What is networking, right? Here's my definition of networking. Networking is reaching out to others who have information and resources that you need to help you. That is networking, okay? Now let's apply it to a military context. Have you ever been assigned a job or a task by a leader that you have never done before? Okay,
multiple times.
What did you do?
Hey, Lieutenant King, plan this brigade ball for us. I've never been an event planner at all. And now it's like, okay, now I'm planning a ball for over 300 people.
So what did you do? What did you do?
I asked. First of all, I was talking with, the person who assigned me, like, what are your expectations? Then I started to reach out to some of my buddies in the S3 shop operations. And then they said, yeah, talk to these like specific hotels, see what they're offering. And then I got educated by multiple hotel companies as to what they could offer. But it was just, going back and forth from my boss to my buddies to these customers, or really these stakeholders externally that I would be purchasing from because I was the customer at that point. So
did you have to cold call anybody in that process?
Yeah, several. I cold called several hotels for their prices. I cold called multiple events, photographers, party attenders, and it was so many phone calls of, hey, I'm just trying to do this thing on this date. What options are there? And as I began to learn more, I began to speak the language more, but it was really just, hi, I need help, but also this is what I'm trying to do. What options are there?
Okay. So let's just stop with that statement right there. What's the difference between that and networking?
I couldn't tell you.
Okay, but that's a point. I think veterans though in uniform will gladly cold call anyone to accomplish the mission. You will reach out to the duty desk to get in touch with the 3, the 4, the 3 Alpha or whoever, and I don't even know who they are. Someone just said, call this command. They've done it before. You need help. They're a good guy to talk to. And I'll just call them out of the blue and tap them on the shoulder and get advice. But now I say, hey, I want you to do that same conversation, but it's for you and your goals for your own life. And I want you to go on LinkedIn and find a fellow Marine or a fellow soldier. And I want you to tap them on the shoulder and say, I need help. I can't do that. Why? I don't know them.
That I'm trying to make up an excuse, but it's hard to, because the excuse,
there is
the excuse that I can. Yeah, I know.
But there's a reason. It's not an excuse, but there's a foundational reason. It seems selfish and it requires us to be vulnerable. I'm now asking for help for me, and I don't have the answer. It isn't for my command. It isn't for the mission. It's for me, and it's for my family. And I now have to be vulnerable, and I don't know what I'm going to do with it. And so that vulnerability and ignorance causes us to do nothing, and we miss out on the best resource in existence, which is our fellow veterans.
How would you reframe it then to say you're not being selfish?
So the best way to reframe that is to realize that you and your family are now an independent business unit, and all you're doing is asking for advice for a business. It just happens to be yours. And I think the other part is getting better at understanding what is your ask, right? What is the advice you're looking for? What is the gap you have? If I can better understand that it's not selfish, it's actually required to do this for my family and fight for them to be able to be mission successful and accomplish the goal that I'm just tasking myself with, right? Then that creates better confidence. But then 2, when I understand that it's okay to ask and how to ask, it just flows better, right? And I've taught this in my Empowered Transition class, and I show it to people and they're like, wow, like I never thought about it like that. Okay, I'm actually a lot more comfortable now because I didn't understand those aspects.
Asking, someone could say, well, what if I don't have a family? It's just me, right? But it's not just the fact that I am asking for myself. Like, me looking for a mentor is actually a benefit for the person that could mentor me, right?
Correct. And altruistically, if it comes down to them getting you hired, many companies have a referral bonus. So you finding that mentor, them getting your resume into a hiring manager and you getting hired means they're going to get paid too, right? So I think there's an intrinsic and an extrinsic reason it's important to network, which is reaching out and asking for help. I won't do the full demo here for the podcast, but I mean, there's a people tab on every company's page, and you can filter their entire employee database by your branch of service and find someone just like you, right? Like, it's a huge tool to just start a conversation. But don't go in saying, I need a job. I'm looking for advice and help. If you ask for advice, you might get a job. If you ask for a job, you're probably just going to get advice.
Everybody, welcome to the PM Pro Show. I know Josh and I have been talking for a second. I still have some questions. I want to collect some data points on you real quick. Your journey into the Marines, were you thinking about project management at the time? Were you just, finding your feet? Like, what was your journey into the Marines? How did that start off?
So journey into the Marine Corps actually started with a conversation about the Army. So when I was in high school, our principal's son went to West Point. He was doing the whole like high school walk around, recruiting thing on, before Christmas type deal. And he kind of talked about the Army, what is West Point, the service academies as a concept, and how great it was going to be. He wanted to branch aviation and go fly, Apaches and things like that. I was like, that sounds really cool. I don't know how I'm going to pay for college. So I'm looking at ways to go into college. And so now it was kind of a very real, like, I think I could do that. Like, I wouldn't mind being in the military, and it's a way to get to college. And this was pre 9/11. So like, wars weren't going on. It was just a way to go to a really good school, have a start of a career, and move on. My mentor at the time, in high school, a guy named Billy Book, was a Gulf War Marine, machine gunner, deployed, to Iraq. And he told me I wasn't allowed to go into the Army. And I was like, why not? He's like, man, you can't be a soldier. You gotta be a Marine. Go to the Marines Academy. And I was like, what the hell is that? Like, what's the Marines Academy? I never heard about it before. He's like, oh, it's called Annapolis. Look it up. I was like, okay. So I had, read about Annapolis in my books that, I didn't really understand much of what that meant. Later, sophomore, junior year, I'm doing construction projects with him, and he trusted me. He gave me the belief that I could do whatever I wanted. He's just one of those guys I really respected outside of my dad. So I looked at it, I was like, I'd rather be a Marine than a soldier anyway. So, I looked at Annapolis, started working the application process. So, I rapidly went through the application process, got hooked up with a blue and gold officer, got my own congressional appointment, tried applying to ROTC, got denied ROTC.
Wow.
So it was just kind of like, how do I get to college? Like, I didn't have any means to really pay for school. My grandma had a college education fund that was like $4,000, I think, at the time, like I was going to graduate. So that's going to like pay my trip to the college, not really cover much anyway.
It.
So it was really just about going to college. And so, I applied and, by God's grace, I got accepted, even though I have 2 screws in my foot. And through this process, all the things I did actually helped me get into the academy because they were concerned about, hardware. I shattered my foot when I was 12. and it's held together by screws. But because I had actually run the PFT and passed the PFT, trying to go enlisted, they were able to use that as he's okay, right? So, I mean, God had used this journey of drive for me to allow me to get into the Naval Academy. So I shipped off there in 2001, right after high school. And you get the choice to pick what you want, but every company there has a senior enlisted advisor, and all of mine happened to be Marines too. And I was just drawn to them from my friend and my mentor growing up, and just liked being around them. I liked the behavior of the Marines. I mean, you could tell who wanted to be a Marine by how shiny their shoes were and how their uniforms looked. So I went to the summer training programs, focused on allowing me to become a Marine, took the training test to become an aviator, got accepted into the aviation program. And so I chose, Marine Corps aviation as my career path. So that was my start into the Marine Corps. And my plan was 20 years and I'll retire. That was my...
So, yeah, I was just going to ask about that. Was it the 20 years no retire? So then project management, business management, running your own business, with you and a small team starting a business together, that was not on the table.
No.
At the time.
In fact, none of my future military career was anything that I actually planned on. My thought was I want to do 20 because it's required that you have an 8.5-year contract after you finish flight school. So I knew going in, I'm in for like a 10, 11-year career at a minimum.
Might as well push for the other part.
So I'm just going to do 20, right? So I kind of went into the mindset, relegated to I'm going to do 20. Going through flight school, I had delays, separated my shoulder in an accident. It took me a little longer to finish flight school, but like we're in the Warriors, man. I mean, the window lickers are getting promoted. Like I had no concern that like not promoting was going to happen. Do the right things. Just keep your head down and do what you're supposed to do. I do have a pride problem in some things, and standardization was not really there as I was going through the end of Harrier training. I got selected into aviation jets and was flying Harriers. And towards the end of that, they were trying to make up student production and just, they were gun decking flight logs. They were cutting corners. They were doing things that were unsafe. And because I was the most senior student, I blew the whistle on it. I went and talked to safety about it. And I was like, hey, like, what are we doing? My class is scared. Like, we don't like this. And then at that point, I became a target. That I wasn't one of the guys. So I went through, finished flight school, graduated the RAG, went to the fleet, and then just early on, kind of had some issues and friction a little bit. And 6 months in, the CEO was like, hey, you're grounded, pending an investigation, like out of nowhere, like out of the blue. And so,
man,
all right, cool. Like stuck my head down. I was like, I'm going to do the best I can. Became the acting OPSO, increased sortie generation by 20%, applying lean principles to maximize sortie generation, went out to ITX and we were crushing it. Everyone around was like, hey, you're going to get it. Like, went through the investigation unanimously. They said, you should be kept flying. You're a great stick. You've got a good record.
At least we had some justice there.
And then the CEO said, I disagreed with the board and I recommended removal of flight status, and so I didn't get told until I'd already gone through the next level of chain of command at that point, and my world fell apart, honestly. Like I went to my car and cried. Just felt so betrayed, at that point. But got out a plan, and that's where I don't know what everybody's faith is listening to this, but I know the Bible verse came to my head, which I grew up in the church, but I don't remember ever reading this part of the Bible, which is why I think it was a God thing. And it's where Pontius Pilate is standing next to Christ, where he's about to essentially, execute him or give the execution order. And he says, don't you realize I have the power to set you free? And Christ's response is, you only have the power my dad gave you. Right. And like, that's what came to me in my car while I'm crying. And just destroyed. I was like, God, you are here, right? Like, I don't get it. I don't understand it, but you are here. So my wife is 3 months pregnant at this time as well. So I got a new kid on the way.
Man.
Trying to change careers. And then I got, wait, hold that. You're deploying in 3 weeks, right? We're short pumping you to Afghanistan on an IA deployment with NATO. Go get ready to leave. I'm deploying, which means I'm not going to be home for the birth. So now I got to tell my wife, by the way, I'm not going to be here when the baby's born, and just all that friction to go through it. But again, God knew. Like I deployed with NATO doing air logistics, strat air planning as an air logistics officer. They called us an air liaison, but it was way more than that. I'm coordinating contracts. I became a corps. I'm buying, $1 million of airplanes. I'm moving the Afghan army all over Afghanistan. We flew over 50,000 people in 6 months. I mean, so just doing air coordination, logistical coordination, project management, which I learned later was
I was
called
about to
project.
say, and that's how that sort of fed into your project management experience.
Yep. That's kind of where it started. I was learning about my passion to do this. It made my decision that I really wanted to go logistics. Afterwards, got a letter of recommendation from my command. At that point, to get the choice, I got my selection, came back from that deployment to a 6-week-old daughter, which was great. She was healthy, and then went to ground school in logistics. And I loved it, honestly. Like I loved logistics, loved coordination, loved transportation, loved distribution, like loved all those pieces. Went from there to the infantry as a battalion S. The CEO interviewed me first. He's like, I wanted to make sure you have the right mindset to do this coming from aviation. And I really appreciate Tyler Zagurski was the CO. He became the CO of 8th and I after that up at Headquarters Marine Corps. Great guy, like nothing but respect for the man. Truly. He trusted me. Again, he gave me empowerment. He believed in me. So kind of after that, like, you're kind of worthless. What are you going to be now? To have that, father figure look over you and say, I believe in you, was huge, right? Just, it's been a road, right? Like I didn't know anything really about project management at all at that time, but my next command, I got told about Lean Six Sigma. I was the maintenance officer for the headquarters battalion at that point, after the infantry battalion, and I got trained in Lean. And that was my first real introduction to project management, was Lean Six Sigma. And I loved it.
So they had that option for you while you were actively serving.
Correct. There's a DoD directive, the 5010.42 and 43 say that you should have a continuous process improvement program and you should be training Lean Six Sigma. So I took that to my command and said, hey, sir, we should be having one of these. We don't. How about you send me to the community college and pay for me to go get my green belt? He said, great. So they actually paid for me to get my yellow belt first, and then they paid for me to go get my green belt. They were going to pay for my black belt, but there weren't enough students to hold the class. And I loved it. I mean, we were fixing real world problems, with no cost, low cost solutions about quality error. Like, absolutely geeked out on it. I didn't realize I was already doing it. My maintenance team came to me and they're like, hey, we're going to fail. I did a 5 why root cause analysis. They're like, well, because the system is too slow. We just implemented GCSS Marine Corps about a year earlier. The system is not fast enough for us to fix all of the errors we're seeing. Why isn't it fast enough? Well, the bandwidth is too slow. Okay, why is the bandwidth too slow? There's too many users. Okay, why are there too many users? It's like, well, we're East Coast. When we wake up, like, Japan's on it a little bit. But then by the time the West Coast gets on, about like 10 o'clock in the morning, like, it just stops. It just shuts down completely. I was like, okay, well, I can't make the system faster. I can't make the users less, but I can control when we do work, right? So we brainstormed it. I said, how about you guys work the midnight shift? And they're like, sure. And because of that result, we had the highest inspection rating of any unit in Camp Lejeune for the next 3 years.
Wow. So we went from having, this system sucks, which honestly the system did have its difficulties, to, yep, okay, this is like a timing issue, right? Because you just looked into it deeper.
Correct. So we found the actual problem and found an actual solution that didn't cost us anything, didn't burden anybody else. They weren't working any extra hours at all, right? So I didn't work weekends. I didn't burn the team. I didn't ask for a contract. I didn't ask for
overtime them into midnight. You just made the midnight.
No, we just made the midnight. And because of that, we crushed it. So again, when you understand what the requirements are, when you understand what the inspection's asking, it's not how you do maintenance, it's how you record the doing of maintenance, right? It's an analysis of your ability to manage maintenance, not do maintenance.
Even when searching for a career, okay, why is it that, you want this job? Why is it that we could go down to the details of that?
And we'll deep dive on the requirements mapping process, which is really what you're talking about, because I think we naturally speak in solutions, not requirements, because we think we're supposed to have the answer already. And that's a whole nother deep dive. The military planning process doesn't have a way to support a lot of your garrison-based work, right? The military planning process is fantastic for killing people and blowing shit up. It is not very good at doing sustainment function stuff.
Long-term logistics,
administration, even IT, comm. Like, most of your non-grunt, non-kinetic planning isn't really benefited by using the military planning process. It was MDM, PMP, JVP, like, it doesn't matter which one you want to use. Those are really about holistic, unit-sized, formational, kinetic type operations. And going through PMP, it would have given me a process that I could have been using. I don't need 3 COAs. I need a single actionable plan. I need to understand the total objectives and understand the actual cost of work. I need to know how to do resource mapping and resource alignment and scheduling and then monitor work. It just gave me such a
resource acquisition, all that.
Yeah. Make or buy analysis. Like, hey, do I source this from in the division? Do I source it from the MLG? Right? Do I get it from a different unit? Like, so just all those little concepts that we think are civilian, they aren't civilian at all. Like, they're directly military. And that's a really kind of set of passion. I was like, man, this is great. I'm so glad I got certified on active duty. And then in transition, I used a headhunter. I got into project management as a profession, and it was a great fit. Like, the idea of being in the field, doing construction, felt like being in the military. I was with the trades and the unions. They had the whole, like, superintendent, foreman, journeyman, apprentice. I was like, that's like, sergeant major and staff sergeant. And then I got the junior listed on the bottom. I mean, it was a direct parallel. It felt great, like, being in projects. So I just loved the career. And then, Tim called me up and said, hey, you want to help me build a company called PM-ProLearn? Like, you understand what I am. You understand the passion for it. Let's go try it. I was like, I don't know jack about sales, but I believe in this, right? Like, I saw what it did for me.
Back to starting something that you've never been told to do before. Like, hey, how do I figure it out, right?
Figure it out. Like, all right. So I went thrown from aviation to logistics. Okay, we'll figure it out, And so I left construction, got into consulting. That fit a lot of who I was while we were building PM-ProLearn on the side to kind of see if we could make this thing real. And that was one of the things. When I left the Corps, I was hurt, right? I felt betrayed. I felt rejected. And I said, I want to go to be appreciated somewhere. I'm going to go civilian. My wife, in her infinite wisdom, and she's absolutely amazing, it's like, you're going to miss it. Screw them all, right? Like, I was angry. I was hurt. I was like, screw them all. I don't care. 6 months later, I'm like, I want to go back. Like she was right. Like the wisdom of the wife that we should all listen to, right? Like I really wanted to go back. Being around the DoD again just felt so much better. It was a better fit. It was a better fit for me relationally as a professional. And then PM-ProLearn was kind of this idea on the side that just kept growing and growing and growing. But it's really been like, how do we create the warfighter of tomorrow beyond technology, right? And that's been kind of the vision we've had with PM-ProLearn that I'm so passionate about, which is how do we create the thought leadership and thought capability we need to beat the future conflict? And I think we missed the mark when we talk about technology, right? Technology is just a tool that we have to have somebody to use, but the person doesn't know how to be empowered or how to use it in a means that can solve the problem, then it's just a paperweight, right? Technology without empowerment is a paperweight.
Relying upon AI to like think of everything for you when you're not using how to properly use it. That's
correct.
The newest one.
But if I don't feel that I'm free to think on my own, then I'm not even going to wield the technology in a way that I think was best, right?
How do we make these leaders more, agile, focused, and even having the ability to have the flexibility of thought? For example, I just heard you say that, while you're doing these other careers right now, you're also on the side maintaining some aspect of building a relationship, trying to build your own thing. Some people, they might just want to, sit down and do only one thing, but it's having that, I guess you could say, that flexibility in order to like try different things.
It is. And that's the breadth of the military profession, though, is you are never just an expert in one thing, right? You are leading people constantly. And I think we talk about leadership and management in the military as opposing evils, right? I don't want to be a manager. I want to be a leader. Well, anyone who's a professional needs to understand logistics. And if you understand logistics, you manage resources, right? You have to lead people and manage stuff, and you have to be able to do both, and you have to do both simultaneously, but you also have to let go of control, back to agility and empowerment that goes, hey, I'm going to give you this much stuff because I think it's what you need. How you choose to use it, I don't care. Go fail and break it. I mean, like, to see a commander say, I don't care how you want to use it, go figure it out. But, again, we go back to the agility and mindset. Back when OIF and OIF were created, after 9/11, the whole horse soldier concept. There was no script for anything we were doing. I don't know. Here's a laser designator and a box of cash and a freaking donkey. Like, just hope your ass don't wear out. Go. Like, I don't know. Just keep me posted. Let me know what you need. It was very trusting. It was very empowering. The march up, with General Mattis going up to Baghdad and the blitzkrieg that went up there. We were outrunning logistics lines. There was no script. It was just go figure it out. I trust you. I'll have your back. I'll trust you. Back to Mount and early operations of urban combat, through, Anazaria and Fallujah and some of the biggest battles out there. We had green on blue issues where, Air Force jets are filleting Marines and no one's getting fired. No one's talking about it. Why? Because we realized they're trying to do the right thing and they have a bias for action. So we had this entire culture in the military through the start of the war that was just get the mission done. I'll protect you. I'll have your back. Focus on value. Be agile. I trust you. Go. Right? And it stopped being about trust and empowerment. It became about compliance. Just don't screw up. Just don't mess up. If you're a commander, just don't get any attention on you whatsoever. Be the gray man, stay below the radar, and just promote on to the next one. So we're not really taking any thought on how to fix things. We started reinforcing the status quo. We start creating this bias for lack of creativity, this bias for, compliance. And now guys like me who are the creative look like an outlier because why are you trying to break the ship? And I was like, I just want to make shit better. I don't want to. We can just make it better. Why are we not trying to make it always better? Why are we not trying to think creatively? Why are we not trying to think out of the box? And I think that became the cultural friction. And even now they're talking about, even at AUSA, about how do you promote the creative? Like, how do you have a system that allows for that creativity? Even Secretary, Hegseth talking about that in his speech to all the generals, whether you like it or not, he's talking about the need to create, protection for those who think differently. And I was like, again, it's just this kind of continued theme reinforcing our mission, which is how do you create agility of thought? How do you empower leaders? How do you create thought warfighters through industry, right? And industry is trying to solve that same problem. The training that we bring to the table through Lean Six Sigma, which you just got certified. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you for that.
Lean Six, Agile, PMP, and change management. These are not civilian disciplines, right? These are industry disciplines that directly enhance military capability now, right? These will help make warfighters better today. And then we're bridging that credibility gap that you and I talked about earlier tomorrow, where when I leave, I'm not just a veteran, I'm a certified professional with a veteran background, right? That's a completely different story to tell than I'm a veteran trying to become a professional versus I am a professional who's a veteran, right? And it may sound nuanced, but it's really not. Because just like when you're building a business, if I walk in and say, hey, I'm trying to do something I've never done before, would you believe in me? It sounds like crap. Versus I've got years of experience doing this and I'm licensed and certified and bonded and insured, and I'm going to protect you to back up why I'm so damn good at what I do. I'm not trying to sell trust to a foreigner using language they don't understand. I'm selling trust to a peer using their own language and stories they can relate to, right? And I think that's just such a huge thing we don't talk about, in transition.
The person thinking about transitioning or even far away from transitioning, they just know that they may not be serving in the military forever. What should be the first thing that they're really trying to align their eyes to, like from today?
It's too broad, I think, to be as specific as I want, but I'd say it comes down to one thing: when you just start, right? Just start. Don't wait until tomorrow to invest in yourself or try to figure it out. Just start now. I didn't start pursuing a master's degree because I thought I had 10 years to figure it out, even though I wanted one, but I was like, I got TA, I got time for that. So I waited around and I was indecisive on what master's degree to get, whether it's an MS in supply chain management or an MBA or whatever. Just start, do something, right? So pick a plan and start doing something. Use your educational benefits, use the resources at your fingertips today. Just start. And then in that, I would say, pick a direction to invest, education, certification now, and then start exploring who you are and what you are, right? Things like Myers-Briggs, discover your why, DISC profiles, Clifton strengths. Like, know who you are, like know how you think, know how you're built. If I don't know who I am, I don't know if where I'm going matches who I am. So start learning about you, start having conversations about your future, whether it's staying in the military, getting out of the military, and then start figuring out a plan to fill in the gaps. But just start, right? Just start.
Hey, thank you so much, Josh. Hey, thank you all to our listeners. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. We'll have more conversations just one-on-one with Josh. You're actually going to see him more often, especially when we interview others. So again, thank you so much, Josh.
I appreciate it, Rob. Thanks for everything you do. Look forward to the conversations in the future. And if you want to reach out, find me on LinkedIn or email jatkinson@pm-prolearn.com. I'd love to have a talk with anybody out there.
That's a wrap for today's episode of the PM Pro Show. We appreciate you spending time with us, and we hope you're walking away with something valuable to apply in your own life. If you enjoyed this conversation, the best way to support us, completely free, is by subscribing and sharing. As a veteran-owned small business, every bit of support helps us continue bringing great content to you and others in the community. Thanks again for being here, and until next time, keep learning, keep leading, and keep making an impact.